Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our second and last strike forum. So today's session is particularly aimed at our postgrad students, especially if you are a postgraduate teaching assistant or an hourly paid lecturer. This session is the right space for you to bring any concerns, questions, and most importantly, to hear from both the university and from UCU about what's going on around industrial action, what is being done to mitigate the impact, and how you can get involved as well. So you might be aware from the strike last term, from the 1st to the 3rd of December, that UCU have voted across the whole of the UK to take industrial action on two very separate issues, but still both very relevant. The first one is relating to pensions, and the second one is more related to the 4 fights that UCU bring, which are more around equal pay, working conditions, mental health, gender pay gap, and those kinds of things. So some examples of industrial action that you might experience are teaching strike, which means that you will have no teaching, for example, but also there's action short of strikes, which is something like marking boycott, where your lecturers might not be marking or working outside of work hours, or doing any voluntary activities that they might have done when it's not a strike period. So for this term, there will be 10 days of strike action spread out across 3 different weeks. They go from the 14th to the 18th of February, and then we have the 21st and the 22nd of February, and then finally from the 28th to the 2nd of March, there will also be action. So our role as a students' union, of course, is to represent and protect the interests of our members, and particularly for today's session, we have, it's not an issue, but it's something that we need to consider, and it's the fact that our graduate teaching assistants are both represented by us as well as UCU, so that's why we made a special session to tackle this particular part of the issue. So we will follow a format that we've followed for the previous strike forums, where we'll give Ibi from UCU, who's the vice president, the opportunity to come and do an opening statement and explain the situation from UCU's point of view. But we also have Colin Smith from the HR team at the university, and Ben Hutchinson as well, who's a director of graduate studies in the Arts and Humanities division, to give the perspective from the university side, what the university has been doing, how have they been negotiating and working alongside UCU to solve this issue and to mitigate for the impact against students. So Ibi, if you don't mind, I'd like to give the floor to you. How do we switch the slides?
Just the arrows.
Oh, these ones. Sorry.
Definitely did last time. There you go.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I am co-vice president of the local UCU branch. And I'm also currently a research assistant, and I just finished my PhD 4 weeks ago. I had my viva. Who of you are postgrad students? Yeah. Are you also teaching? Yeah. Okay. So first of all, if you don't know, as a student, you can be a member of UCU. That's free if you're a student, which means you can join today if you're not a member yet, and you can join us on the picket line next Monday. Basically, why are we going on strike? There are 2 issues. One is the pensions and the other one is 4 fights. The problem is that UK higher education at the moment is in trouble. There are issues across the sector, and over the last years and decades, the situation has become worse and worse. What I want to focus on today in particular is the 4 fights. Lots of people are employed on precarious contracts, meaning they very often don't know whether they will have a contract the next year. Very often contracts don't even go for an entire year. People might be on 9-month contracts, meaning they don't have employment over the summer. That's one of the issues. In terms of working hours, I mean, contracts can be quite funny in that way. They often say you're supposed to work 37 hours a week, but then it also says that you're meant to do all the tasks your line manager tells you to do within reason. And I don't know anyone on a full contract who works 37 hours a week and not more than that. Working in the evenings is quite normal. Working on the weekend is quite normal. So how are we fighting back? Basically, nationally, we're going on strike now, 10 days. What does that mean? There will be no teaching, there will be no office hours, etc. from members of staff who decide to go on strike. There will be some pickets. And what's crucial to remember is that we're not getting paid when we go on strike. So we make the decision to take those actions. It's not a decision we make easily. It's not a decision we necessarily enjoy. No one likes to go on strike. It has consequences for us, financial consequences, but really the situation at the moment is that a lot of people are at breaking point. A lot of people are overworked. They're not getting paid for the jobs they do, for the work they do. And therefore, nationally, members have decided to take action. The 4 fights are basically about low pay. If you look at this first bit on top, salaries have fallen significantly against inflation since 2009 by 17%. As I said, casualization is a big issue. There is a massive number of academics on 0-hour contracts, meaning they don't know how much work they're going to have over the year, which also means they don't know how much pay they're going to get. Workload is another one, and that is one that we are also fighting locally at the moment, in addition to national efforts. Connected with that, obviously, mental health issues. I'm sure lots of you will know what it's like, the struggle to do your studies, do your work, meet deadlines and so on. And I can tell you staff are feeling the pressure as well. And then inequality as something that hasn't been addressed in academia in a very long time. There is a significant pay gap between men and women, a significant pay gap between black and white people, and also a significant disability pay gap. So these are all the things we are fighting against at a national level. So that's not necessarily something that we are negotiating here locally with management. That's something that the national negotiators are taking up. But the point is that the more pressure we put on the sector across universities, the more the chance we have to actually win this. What are we fighting for? It's pretty straightforward. We want things like a £10 minimal per hour wage, which isn't a lot to ask. We want a framework to make sure that people have secure jobs and aren't worrying from term to term whether they will be employed the year later. We want manageable workloads. We want people not to work 50 or more hours a week for pay that hasn't increased in the last decade. And we want equality. We don't want anyone to get less paid just because of their gender, sexuality, ethnicity, because they're disabled, and so forth. So, yeah, what are we fighting for? Dignity at work and dignity in retirement. We want our work to be valued, basically. And we want to be able to create the learning conditions for you guys that you deserve, which isn't possible if you're overworked and underpaid. Simple as that. How can you get involved? Well, as I said, if you are a student, especially if you're postgrad, you can be a UCU member. You can go and strike yourself, but also there's going to be a democratized UKC student march at some point, We are trying to get out the message of our strike calendar. I don't know if that's something that maybe the student union can send out with detailed information of all the teach outs and teach-ins that we're going to have. Many of them are going to be online, so there's going to be a Zoom link on there and you can just go and attend meetings and come visit us on the picket line if you're around. You can just say hi, chat with us. Yeah, it would be great to have conversations. Yeah.
Would it be possible for you to explain to students the pensions element of it as well?
Yeah. So basically, there has been an evaluation in March 2020 of how the pension scheme is going to develop in the future. Now, we all know March 2020 was when COVID hit, and the economy was looking really, really badly at that time. So it wasn't the best moment to choose to look at how pensions might develop. And because of that, there is now the threat of a 35% cut for anyone, especially for people who are now joining the pension scheme, which is, you have to remember that basically pensions are deferred salary. So we are saying we're going to put some of the salary we would usually get into a pension scheme to be saved to get then when we go and retire. And basically there's going to be a massive cut now to those pensions, especially people who are newly joining the scheme. So although the sector has been transformed into the system of marketization and capitalization, especially since the introduction of student fees, what's happened is that the people actually working in the sector and doing the work, the teaching, the research and so on, are getting less and less out of it. So we're saying we need to actually get the money back that we're putting into the scheme. This needs to be a fair system. We don't want all the student fees to just go and pay management and pay shiny buildings. What we want is the money that we put in to come out again and to work in a system that pays us fairly now and once we retire. So basically we're asking for new evaluation. We're asking for a change in the management of how the pension scheme is currently run. And again, that is something that is being negotiated nationally. We don't necessarily have an input, but Karen Cox, as we see, has the opportunity to lobby Universities UK to take action. So one of the things we want from her is to actively encourage the responsible people to take action and to rethink what they are trying to do and cut our pensions. That's basically it. I say our pensions. I'm not actually in the pension scheme because I don't earn enough. So yeah. Any other questions?
So we'll take questions at the end.
Excellent.
Just a few I forgot to mention at the start. You can also find out more information, more background information in our strike work page on the Kent Union website. And we will ask you to please hold any questions that you have until after the university representatives have given their perspective on the issue. And you can type those in the chat and we'll be able to answer them in fair time. Yes, thank you.
Well, thanks very much for inviting us to come and represent the university. Thanks very much for presenting the facts as the union sees them. It's very clear and very helpful, I think, to see them all on one screen like that. I think the university obviously very much appreciates that there are issues here that we are all struggling with and we're trying to make progress on, and we're in discussions with the university and dialogue with the union, and that's clearly extremely important. Obviously, we regret very much that it's come to a strike. The university always wants to avoid that, like any workplace, and the last thing we want is for your education to be interrupted, particularly given that it's been so interrupted in the last couple of years with COVID. My colleague Colin from HR will be able to talk a little bit more about the details and the actual specifics of why the strike is happening and what the university's position is on those details. I think what I really want to say, the message I want to give, is that you need to be assured that given that the strike is happening, and as I say, we regret that, but given that it's happening, our focus is very much on mitigation, what we can do to mitigate the impact of the strike, to mitigate above all the disruption caused by the strike, such that it has as little impact as possible on your student experience. And the other thing I want to say, and we'll come back to this point as well, is that given that this is a forum focusing specifically on postgraduates, as was said at the start of this session, are in the slightly unusual position, slightly tricky position at times of being both students and teachers, always in that transitional moment. So there's a risk when strikes happen of you being doubly affected, as it were. On the one hand, in your category of student, and the other hand, in your category of teacher. So we're very aware of that. I think probably the first and in some ways most important thing I need to say. We're very aware of that double potential for being affected, and that's why we need to think about this from that double perspective, in stereo, if you like. What does it mean for you as a student? Particularly, I think for PGT students, PGR is possibly less effective because it's easier to move supervisory sessions and so on. But PGT students, like undergraduate students, risk being affected if their classes are cancelled. And then, of course, a lot of PGRs are teachers. So in your capacity as a teacher, you may well find that you are either striking, or conversely, you may not be striking, and that may equally have an impact on you because you may be having conversations with colleagues who are striking. So the different categories here, not everyone is striking, we're very aware of that, and we very much respect people's right to strike or not to strike. We obviously that's our position, and as I say, we want to be careful that we take into account the particularity of the PG position as both student and teacher. So we'll come back perhaps in a moment to what we're doing to think about that and how we can mitigate that impact. Before we do, I'll give Colin the chance to talk about some of the issues.
Thanks, Ben. So obviously the strike action, whilst regrettable, is based on five key themes. One is described as the 4 fights, which relates to pay and conditions, and the other relates to the USS pension scheme. That pension scheme fight is based on the deficit identified by the people who run the pension scheme, Universities UK, who need to address that deficit. So there are 2 ways that they can do that. They can either reduce benefits or increase payments. They're doing a hybrid model that effectively addresses both. So what will happen is that everyone's pension contributions up until this point, pension benefits accrued up until this point, are secure. After the reference date, then any pension contributions will increase and pension benefits accrued will reduce. While the situation as a whole is regrettable, we think that the changes can be made that prevent unaffordable raises whilst retaining some of the key aspects of the pension, so the key benefits of the pension. What we want to do is to see changes in the governance arrangements that would see deficits being calculated like this falling away. Ultimately, we know as a university, if we have to spend more in one area, such as staff pensions, then we have less money to spend in other areas. In terms of the 4 fights, looking at casualisation, historically, we've had an issue with short-term contracts being overused in the sector, as you quite rightly point out. And this can be an issue for those very much at the start of their academic careers. We have made real progress in this area at Kent since 2018. One of the reasons why I'm here at the university is I came in, as you will know, to look at GTA contracts, and I've been here ever since. Not looking at GTA contracts throughout, but doing other things as well. By working with trade union representatives, we've greatly reduced our reliance on those hourly paid lecturer contracts by creating both new salaried academic posts and moving to guaranteed minimum hours posts wheresoever possible. It still is a work in progress, and we are looking at the payments menu that is used for the HPL staff, where that is the best solution for all parties involved in that relationship. In terms of pay, our staff do work incredibly hard, and we want to make sure that they're rewarded fairly and as well as possible. While we have to live within our means, we are pleased to take the break off last year's pay freeze and give staff a pay rise of between 1.5% and 3.5% last year. We appreciate that, though this has not yet been agreed nationally by the trade unions. We've also put in place a reward strategy to help ensure that our pay policies are fair for everyone. In terms of the equality strand of the 4 fights, equality, diversity, inclusivity are core values at Ken, and we're working hard to reflect these in all of our work. Whilst there is still a lot of work to do, we've taken steps to reduce our gender pay gap and are focusing on other protected characteristics too. We are proud to receive this Dina Swan Silver Award recently, which reflects the work that has gone into this area. And what this does remain a major focus for us, and will do until we've stamped out remaining pay gaps. We'll shortly be launching an equal pay audit across the university so that we can work with our staff to identify the best ways to reduce these gaps. In terms of workload, we recognise that workload remains a challenge at Ken, and we're very clear that we need to do something to address that. This hasn't been helped by some of the national issues around staff recruitment at present, but we are still looking for creative solutions to address those issues. We have a wellbeing working group that's looking at specific issues affecting staff mental health. We've added additional resource where we really need it, particularly for those working with Kent Vision, recognising the issues there. Ultimately, we want everyone to feel proud to work at Ken and to take advantage of the connections that they can make here.
Thank you very much. So that's the response to these specific issues, and as I say, my focus and the focus of the managers on the academic side, in terms of tutors and supervisors, teachers, and heads of department, our focus is to mitigate the impact, as I say. Now, what can that mean? That can mean essentially, I suppose, from 2 points of view: the point of view of delivery of classes or other events, and the point of view of assessment. So assessment is a particular, we've seen this in previous strike periods, assessment can be a particularly delicate issue, because what can happen either if you're being assessed now or if you're being assessed further down the line, what you don't want to happen is you're being asked to be assessed on material that you've missed because of the strike. That's not fair, so we have to be careful to avoid that. So we ask colleagues to avoid that in various different ways, making sure they teach material that has been taught, rescheduling classes where possible, looking at the assessment criteria, etc. What we can't do legally is ask union members who decide to strike to declare in advance whether they're going to strike. So that obviously then makes it tricky in terms of anticipating what is and is not going to run during the strike period. But what we found in the past is that with a bit of common sense and goodwill, we managed to get through this. And most people want to obviously help their students, and most people find ways of warning students so they don't travel in and find their classes not scheduled, that kind of thing. Now, as I say, all of that can be seen from the perspective of the student. If you're a PG student, you can see it from that point of view. Equally, if you're a teacher, if you're a GTA or an HPL or some kind of postgraduate teacher, then I think you have to take into account the same factors, but obviously from the teacher's perspective. And a way to do that, I think, is to seek advice from people who are convening the module conveners, people convening your courses, the more experienced teachers and tutors, supervisors, ultimately heads of school, directors of postgraduate studies, such as I. So that's the overview.
We have a question from the chat for Colin. What is being done to mitigate the financial impact specifically on students who work on hourly paid lecturer contracts when they choose to strike?
If hourly paid staff choose to strike, then they will not be paid for the hours that they don't work. That doesn't change. The only exception to that is GTA contracts, where no deduction will be made for strike days. That's our current pay policy.
So there's the same logic as for any teacher. If you're striking, you're not paid for that period.
There is a strike UCU strike fund though, so if a PGR student is on an hourly paid contract and they get money deducted, they can then claim back from the union. If I am correctly, that is up to £100 a day for, I think, 8 of the 10 days or something like that. And probably they're not going to be working all those 10 days anyway. So yeah.
That sounds like an extremely useful response. So
Yeah.
students will get that message.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution and the representation that we really need for students to get a good grip of what the issue is. And it's really valuable to have both sides of the issue presented here, because tomorrow, as a students' union in Parliament, we will be deciding whether we support the strikes or not. So being able to explain the issue to students and have an open communication channel like this is extremely valuable. I think there's so the UCU representative is Ibi, who is the co-vice president of the Kent branch of UCU. Do we have any more questions coming from the chat? Is there anything else that representatives would like to add that they might have missed, or any comments that the students in the room might want to add to the discussion?
I think it's worth noting that there is a lot of common ground between ourselves and UCU, both particularly around the pensions disputes, and we are working closely with UCU to find a way through that we can agree to seek resolution with the UK on that matter.
Which is essentially because these are national issues.
Yes, they are.
They're not local issues determined by us, the national issues. And we, as Colin says, we don't entirely disagree, I think, in the way we see things on that matter.
Speaking as a USS member, I have a lot of interest aligned here.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else we'd like to discuss? And again, this the recording for this forum will be up on the website, so students can go back to it. So feel free to share it with anyone who you might think would be interested in the issue. And also, like I said, tomorrow we will be having Parliament, so any students are more than welcome to come to Parliament to give us your opinions, your feedback, and help us make this decision, which is extremely important for everyone. But of course, regardless of what the outcome is, Kent Union, as the students' union, as the main representative for students, will work extremely hard to make sure that any impact is mitigated against, and of course that our students' interests are as protected and as safeguarded as possible. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions, and your participation is really, really valuable. And thank you for everyone that's joined the call as well online.
Great. Thanks very much, Lupe. Thank you to Ibi, Colin and Ben for coming along and talking to us. As we mentioned, we have a recording from Monday's forum, and we will have the recording from today's forum as well. Please feel free to share both with your friends, have another watch of them, see if there are any questions that come to mind after the fact, and we'll be sure to pass those on to the relevant parties and get you some answers. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.